Hi there, YouTube family. How are you guys doing today? It's been a rough, however long it's been since I made my last video. I think I got to the roughest point yet, actually. My physical pain and my grief kind of coincided all at once, and had an entire weekend. I can actually say that was the roughest one yet since my husband died. I know it surprises some people that your grief can actually get worse over time, but it happens. It does. And I hit an all-time low, and physically also. I got to a point where I decided I have to make a change for my own survival. And it doesn't mean that the grief is not going to be the same or bad or hard, but I think for some of us there comes a point when you realize that if you keep going the way you're going, you're gonna die. And then you decide you have to make a change. If you're gonna finish out your purpose here on earth. So, I got to that point, and maybe you guys have gotten to that point, or maybe you did years ago, or maybe you haven't gotten there yet. Maybe you just lost whoever, and you're still in those early stages. There's not really a time frame. It just happens at a different time for every person, I think. So, but that being said, I am trying to get back into the Word of God as much as possible. Study like I used to. And it doesn't take the pain away, but it's a good distraction, and it's a good thing to focus on, because you kind of have to force yourself to focus on something different. And it takes a lot of effort. It does, but you'll come to a point where you realize that you have to change your focus. And I could talk a long time about that one, but that's not what I wanted to talk about today. Today is actually going to be on suffering and how can it possibly be good. That's something that I struggle with a good bit. And I think a lot of people do. How do you wrap your brain around the fact that suffering could actually be a good thing? Well, that's what I've been kind of studying lately. and I want to share with you a few thoughts, and that's all I really wanted to do today besides to say hello, because I don't want to make these too long. I know it's hard to listen to them if they're too long. So I am reading in my favorite Bible. It's my Charles Stanley Life Principles Bible, which is my favorite Bible. And I've been reading the book of Romans lately. And he's got, he writes like his own thoughts throughout the Bible, which is cool. And I wanted to read something that he wrote about grace. It just kind of stood out to me because of the suffering and the pain, and it's hard to believe that it could actually be like beneficial in any way, because it seems so stupid and it's so pointless and so ridiculous, and it's hard to wrap your head around. But let me read this to you because I liked it. I thought it was good. This is just a little piece of it, not the whole thing, okay? So, it says, "We stand securely in God's love because of Christ. It's not by our own merit. However, where many people become confused is because of the troubles that they endure. They believe that they must have somehow fallen out of God's favor because of the pain that they face. Yet Paul demonstrates that the Lord even uses the heartaches for our good. Paul wrote, 'We also glory in tribulations, knowing that tribulations produce perseverance, and perseverance character, and character hope. And hope does not disappoint, because the love of God has been poured out in our hearts by the Holy Spirit who was given to us.'" And that's Romans chapter 5. Understand that problems will come into your life. However, there's no reason to believe that the Lord has stopped loving you or that you've somehow lost His grace. Actually, just the opposite is true. God has allowed this suffering so that you will learn to persevere, so you'll develop His character, and so you'll have hope. Now, that doesn't really make any sense to me or to any other human being, because it's contradictory to what we think as people. Like, are you kidding me? God allowed this suffering so we'll learn to persevere? Really? So we'll have hope. How is that hopeful when all hell is breaking loose around you and everything's falling apart? I think that's one of the mysteries of God being who He is, maybe. He says, because of His great love for you, He wants you to experience His eternal abundant life more deeply. And the only way to prepare you for that is through hardship. So, as you can see, even trials are the outpouring of His grace. So instead of doubting God's love because of your troubles, rejoice in them. That's funny. I'll get to that in a minute, though. As 1 Peter 4:12, 13, and 13 admonishes, don't think it's strange concerning the fiery trial, which is to try you as though some strange thing is happening to you, but rejoice to the extent that you partake of Christ's sufferings, that when his glory is revealed, you may also be glad with exceeding joy. So that makes no sense whatsoever if we look at it from a human standpoint, because we're like, are you kidding me? Rejoice when you're suffering? Yay, I'm going through this terrible trial. No. But God says, through Paul's revelation, that you can. But no human being is ever going to figure that out without some kind of revelation from God, because that's ridiculous. And that's kind of what I wanted to talk about today, because it stumps us as humans to think that how the heck should we be glad when we're going through a terrible tragedy or trial? Like, what? And of course, we're not going to be glad or excited about the trial or the loss or the suffering or the pain or the sickness or whatever terrible thing has happened. That's not what we're glad about, because that's terrible. So, of course, we're going to grieve over sad stuff and horrible things. I'm never going to be glad that my husband died. I'm never going to be glad about that, okay? So, what is he talking about here? Well, I think he's talking about the fact that even when we have to go through crap, there is an aspect of it that is good, but it's not good to us. It's good to him, because he knows things that we don't know. And what requires faith is that we have to trust him on that, because it's never going to make sense to us. It doesn't make sense to me. It's like, how is suffering a good thing? That's a bad thing. But God says it can be good because of what comes from it. And it does seem ridiculous to us, but I think it's because we don't see what he sees, and we don't know what he knows. If we did, then we would just agree with him, I guess. We'd be like, oh, yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. But then that wouldn't take any faith if we knew, So I guess a lot of times it doesn't make sense, because if it did, well, then we wouldn't need any faith. So it's faith that pleases God, because he tells us that without faith it's impossible to please him. So the more I study, the more I realize that everything is about faith. The book of Romans talks about how Abraham had his faith is what was accounted to him for righteousness. And it goes into detail about that, but the whole point was it was his faith that mattered, basically. And so I guess as much as we can understand it, if that's what really matters to God is our faith, then unfortunately the only way to build that and to test that and to create that and to strengthen that is through hard stuff. Because you don't need any faith if you're floating along through life happy. So, and I don't like that. Nobody likes that. But apparently that's what's important to God, and it's really gonna make a difference when we get to our eternal home. But we can't see that here. Here, we're so blinded by the world and everything that the world teaches us and tells us that's important that we miss all of that, Like, from a human standpoint, what's important is that I have what I want, basically. I want a happy, healthy life with my husband until I die. Who wouldn't want that? That would be like heaven on earth. That wouldn't be... I guess that would be too easy. No, some people get that. Some people do get that. And I don't know why God picks and chooses who gets it and who doesn't, and how long one person gets it and how long the other doesn't, and all that stuff. I don't know how he decides that. He's God. I guess he knows better than we do. But it just seems ridiculous to us. And I realize, from what I'm studying today, that God does things that are stupid to us. We just think they're dumb. And he made it that way, which is interesting. He made it that way, so we would think it was ridiculous. And that's a bit fascinating to me, that he did that on purpose. And, because we think rejoicing over something painful and suffering, that's stupid. I rejoice over things that are happy and good, right? Not things that make me want to die. But God sees it the opposite way. He's like, oh no, this is a good thing. Okay, that's weird. But he purposefully wanted to be weird. So that was interesting. And I was looking at 1 Corinthians chapter 1, and it talks a little bit about that concept. And I don't know if I should just talk about that here or make another video for that, but I'll mention it really quick because it goes along with what I'm saying. If you have a Bible and you want to look it up, it's 1 Corinthians chapter 1, verse 18, starting there. It says, "For the message of the cross is foolishness to those who are perishing, but to us who are being saved, it is the power of God. For it is written, I will destroy the wisdom of the wise and bring to nothing the understanding of the prudent." And I could read a good bit more, but two verses that I wanted to point out. 25, because the foolishness of God is wiser than men, and the weakness of God is stronger than men. God has chosen the foolish things of the world to put to shame the wise. And God has chosen the weak things of the world to put to shame the things that are mighty. So the whole message of the cross it talks about in this chapter was ridiculous. And he meant for it to be that way because he doesn't do what you expect him to do. Usually he does the opposite, which is interesting. But it was stupid. That's why people had such a hard time believing. That's why they crucified him. They're like, are you kidding? Like, no, we're expecting a Messiah to come and defeat Rome and to be this great warrior and to take over. Not this guy that he doesn't even look like, he looks like one of us, and he came here to to save us. What does that even mean? Now he's gonna die on a cross? What? They were confused. They thought it was stupid. Like, it didn't make any sense. That's not what they were expecting. So, yeah, it's interesting that the most powerful things in the world, which that was the most powerful thing that ever happened in all of existence, was that Jesus died on that cross to save us, to give us a way to get to heaven if we choose him. And yet it seemed so weird. Like, it didn't seem like people would think it would seem. You know, like, I'm a superhero person. I love superhero movies and shows. And what happens when they have a hero? The hero comes in and makes these grand, you know, they make a big scene where they save the day and they defeat the enemy, and they are usually flashy and like strong, and they're showing that off, and they're flying in and all this stuff. And you know, like, I think that's kind of more of what they expected from a Messiah, not some carpenter that was born in a barn. Like, but it's just interesting that that's what God chooses. God chooses what you least expect, and he does things that you think are dumb. And he likes it that way. That's the fun part. Funny part. Like, not really fun for us. No, not at all. But he the foolishness of God is wiser than men. That's what I'm meditating on today, because because it's hard to grasp. And I guess that's comforting to know that it was done that way on purpose so we wouldn't figure it out. So I think God likes to use ridiculous things, because if he ever did something the way we expected him to, I guess then we would think that we figured it out, and he doesn't want us thinking that we are wise in any kind of way of our own wisdom. He wants to make sure that we know it's coming from him, because we could have never figured that out. You know, like, I guess one thing that I have said over and over almost a year now, that my husband died so suddenly, is none of this makes sense at all. Like, this makes the least sense of anything, because well, I could go on and on about why it makes no sense and why it's like tops the list. It tops the chart of things that make no sense, because we waited for that kind of marriage our entire life. We went through horrific relationships and everything else to get there. And then when we finally get there, it's almost perfect. Like, there could not have been two people who were meant for each other more than me and my husband. And then he just dies. That makes no sense. But I guess if you read the Bible, it makes perfect sense, because it makes no sense. Because that's what God does. He does stuff that makes no sense whatsoever. And he has a reason for it that we don't know and that we can't see. And the question is, when it makes no sense, are we still going to trust him? And I have to answer that, and you have to answer that. When it makes no sense whatsoever. When it's like the worst thing that we've ever gone through in our entire life. If you're a follower of Jesus, that's the question. Are we still going to trust him? Even though it's terrible. Well, I will leave you with that today. And I'll discuss more thoughts later if you want me to. And yeah, thank you for all of your prayers. It's been a hard time. But every day we just have to get up and keep walking. Keep walking. Well, It's a picture I was going to show you. My baby. My handsome baby. I will miss him every day. My sweet smile. My whole world. But now we keep going for them until it's our turn, right? It will be our turn soon, so keep fighting the good fight, you guys. One day at a time. Take care.